Hello, my name's Tony Wilson, and by means of an introduction I'll just tell you a little bit of my background. I actually helped to rewrite the technology curriculum document. That's got to be some 15-16 years ago. I was a teacher for 7 years in primary schools. I lectured in early years communication and curriculum and technology. I've also been a storyteller for the last 8 years. Well, this whole project is linked to technology involved with Jack and the Beanstalk. And what I'm going to show you is a series of techniques, some conventions and a few processes that some of you may already know. And I know that some of you will use them already. But what I'm doing is I'm assuming that I'm going from a complete novice when it comes to technology to try and build your confidence. And to give you a serial and understandable logical progression through all of the different kinds of technological processes that you can use. I've got to say that all of the things that I'm going to show you I've actually used when I was in the classroom and when I've been teaching, and all of the different processes and all of the techniques are actually linked. So I'm not just showing you these out of badness just to try and get you to do things. It's more or less to show you why, when we come to paint something a little bit later on, that you understand exactly why you use a particular series of colours or why you have a convention of the light coming from one point. So all of these techniques are linked, and we're going to go from drawing to shading to 3D representation, paper modelling, gluing, sticking, cardboard and paper structures. We're also going to make paper and cardboard girders, and once you've got the confidence to make these kind of things, then you'll be able to get the confidence to show your pupils how to do them. And it's going to be a combination of skills, hopefully in a logical and enjoyable progression. And along the way, you never know, we might even come across just a little bit of art. So I hope you enjoy it. Right, first things first. A lot of the techniques I'm going to be showing you, you will be actually looking over my shoulder as I actually draw or paint or make things with papier-mâché or glue things. So really what I want to show you first and foremost is how to represent something in 3 dimensions. Now this is important because for the older pupils we're going to be looking at how they record the structures that we make, and how to look at and understand the way that a design looks, way that a design specification looks. Well, if we were to try and draw a box, I'm sure we'd all be able to make a fairly good stab at it. And what you have is you would draw a square, like so, and that looks pretty good. Now, the convention is that the light comes from the top right hand corner. So if you imagine that the sun is coming from that side, and then you would look at and you think that, alright, this side is going to be darkest because it's furthest away from the light. Now I'm using quite a heavy pencil. This is a 5B. And straight away that starts to give this 2-dimensional representation of a square just a little bit of body, a little bit of structure. And then you would draw, I know that some people are used to drawing a wire diagram by drawing one square and then another square and rubbing lines out. But if you look at it, you've got the light coming from the top right hand side, this side, so that's going to get the light the last, so that's going to be dark, and that becomes dark as well, and that becomes dark, and so does that. And now you start to get quite a representation of darkness and depth, and you've got, this is the furthest away, that is the closest, and that is about halfway between the two, and you've got something that starts to look a little bit like a three-dimensional cube. This is all well and good, but it's not particularly accurate. And really what I want to show you are techniques that are going to improve the accuracy of your drawing. Now, if you're thinking that the colour comes from the top right hand corner and comes towards this cube, the lightest face is going to be that one. The second lightest is going to be that one, and the darkest one will be the one that's actually closest to us. So instead of just having a square, we now have what looks to our eye as if it is a cube. So if I use quite a dark colour here, and we have red as quite a thick colour, and crosshatch on top of that, you're now starting to get a bit of depth to the colour and the way that it looks. And you've got this, the top face is yellow. All of these techniques are really meant to try and fool the eye, to try and get the eye to look at something that's in 2 dimensions and interpret it as if it is in 3 dimensions. And this side, well, I've got to say that what we are using with the whole of the Jack and the Beanstalk story is that everything that's at the bottom of the beanstalk has a tone of red to it, because that's where the brick house is. And this is a direct representation and linkage between a colour and a position within the story. And at the top of the beanstalk, where there's the gold and the sun, we have a yellow, and where it's the beanstalk, strangely enough, we have green. And if you look, now we have something that fools the eye into looking at it and thinking that this could well be a solid object, because you have light at the top, not so light here, and closest to us and furthest away from the light in a dark colour. Now, what you could do is, and this comes again when we're looking at the way that we're going to use the different ways of recording the clothing of the giant and other characters, when we come to look at how we're going to draw the girders and the boxes that we'll make, what you could do is you could take a felt tip pen, and on those edges that are furthest away from the light, you draw a thick line, and that fades out. And in the same way as you regard the lines, that these ones furthest away are lighter, you shade in the same way, so that it is darker at the bottom left hand corner, and then that fades out. And that hopefully shows you how you can actually use colour to try and represent something in 3 dimensions. And you can do the same again with this. You would draw like a pretty dark line at the side, and you would get that shading to fade towards the top right hand corner closest to the light, like that. And again with the yellow, hard lines furthest away, and it fades away towards the top right hand corner of the drawing. And that's how you would do it freehand. Now, freehand's all well and good if you have the confidence to try and draw a straight line. A lot of children find themselves almost frightened by pencils or frightened by making a mark. And I quite often ask children, I say, well, what did you do at school today? I did some reading, and I did some arithmetic, and I did some rubbing out. And they spend more time rubbing out because they don't seem to have the same kind of confidence in applying a mark. Well, I'm going to show you something that if you try it and then you show it to children, they will have confidence in their own marker making. And this is something that's used a lot within design and technology. This is called a grid. Purely and simply a piece of graph paper on which I've scored out with a thick felt tip pen on top of each of the squares, so that you have a regular, I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 12, a 10 by 12 grid, and you take a piece of paper and you put it on top. Now there is a point to this, because when this is finished you will be able to get the children to make a display, and there's no point in us doing something that's supposed to be design and technology, and rather than just do it freehand, what you should be able to see It might not come across so much on the video, but what you should be able to see through this ordinary photocopying paper, you should be able to see the grade through it. And what you do, and again I'm using quite a heavy pencil here. This is a 5B, so that the marks will come up a little bit clearer on the drawing. But you would put a dot to show where you're going to start, and if we make it so that it's going to be a square that is 4 by 4, I'll just make a small dot like that, and you take a ruler and you draw on top of it. Now again, you've got to think that what I would do is I draw a faintish line there. Again, I would draw another line here, quite faint. Now for children who find themselves scared of actually making a mark, to do something by using a ruler and a grid, it takes away that element of chance. It's very accurate, and it does come out as a very clean line. Straight away, it's not a case of scoring into the paper. You just draw on those lines that are furthest away from the convention of the light. You draw a secondary line on top of it, quite hard, like that. And again at the side, like that. The whole idea of perspective is that it fools the eye. It gets the eye to believe that there's something there that is actually in 3 dimensions. Okay, so you've got your square, that's the face, that's going to be closest to you, and you decide that it's going to be a box that's going to be receding away from you 2 squares along. And again, 1, 2, 2 squares along. Again, 1, 2 squares along, and 1 up, like that. Okay, so it's 1 up and 2 along, 1 up and 2 along, 1 up and 2 along. And again, you do the same thing. You just draw a faint line between those points, and another faint line between those points. Always remembering that the light convention is that it's going to come from the top the top right hand corner of your piece of paper. I'm doing this quite quickly because I couldn't find any paint to dry. And then you draw on top of that line, and now you've got a very accurate representation of a cube. And again, you think about the light's coming from this side, so on this square, this face, you do a secondary line on top. It's not a huge line. You're not trying to score right through the paper. It's only to try and fool the eye. Like that. And again, light's coming out this square, so it's going to be that side. On top, just another line, slightly harder. And again, this bottom one, which is just the furthest away. And there you've got a wire diagram that agrees with the conventions of the light coming from the top right hand corner. Now that we've got our wire diagram, I'm going to show you some more things that you can do. And if we have this face that's closest to us, what you do is on top of that line at the base, you're going to draw a hard red line. An accurate hard red line. And another hard red line just at the inside of that. This is to emphasise the fact that with a lot of drawing, it's about trying to fool the eye. Right, and again, if this is the second darkest, you do another dark line, this time in the face's colour, dark green, and here in green. So, and at the top we'll have yellow. So, and here. And even with those small lines, it does start to emphasise the fact that this is now a representation of a three-dimensional object. So I'm going to take the yellow, start with the yellow first, and instead of doing a specific amount right across, you just do by the edge of the yellow line that you've just done. The even more emphasis is on the fact that this is the furthest away from the light. Okay, and then you do some more, which is slightly less hard, and you spread it out, and you do some more, and it's to the point where there's only the smallest amount of yellow in the top right hand corner. You do the same here. You do an edging, it comes around on top of that dark line, the same amount, and then you spread that out so that when it comes to the top right hand corner, there's only the smallest amount of that colour there. And again, with the red, you do, and what you've got is the representation of three dimensions purely and simply by shading. Spread it out, that leads towards it, so that it comes to the top right hand edge, there's virtually no colour in that place at all. And that hopefully should look like a three-dimensional object. Now, on top of this, now I've got to say, when I first saw this, I didn't really fully understand the reason why you do this. But you have this top edge here, and on top of that top edge you draw with a white pencil. I know that it might seem that you can barely see it in this top edge, but it does, with the eye's perception, give it the idea that this is a three-dimensional object. With shading, we always think that to shadow it we have to draw exactly the same shape as we've already got. Well, that's not true, because what you do is, yet again, with a ruler, a dark line underneath the heavy line, and choose a dark colour, and again underneath just a single strong line and the colour that you've decided to make the shading with, and on this side as well. And you're not trying to draw a square underneath. You you shade almost like a border of a consistent strength all the way around. This fades out, and you do some more and further, not necessarily in a straight line, and hopefully that should look like a three-dimensional object. So let's take what we've got so far, this idea of colouring and shading and use of line to represent a three-dimensional object. Let's take it to use it in Jack and the Beanstalk, and now we've got a grid or a template which is a representation of a bean, and you really do want children to start using as much of a piece of paper as possible. So here we've got we have a picture of a bean underneath, so the children don't have to worry about whether they're going to draw it correctly or not, because it's almost like tracing. They can follow the line of the bean that's underneath, and this is the growing area, like that. Put it on like that, and straight away we've got a drawing of a bean. they can't say that they don't know how to draw it because it's there and it's underneath. And again, we're trying to work out that the light comes from that side. So if you think about it, from about here to there is going to be darker. So you draw on top of that line and it gets darker. And you can fade that out. And straight away, that gives a feeling of depth to our bean. And we have it. And this is where you can have shading. Now, in the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, it does turn around and say that the beans were many different colours. So why don't we use that in our convention? And we've got yellow, which is going to be closest to it, and green in the middle, and red furthest away. So let's do that. So we'll have, we're trying to think of the shading. So this is slightly curved. So we can do some lines to show that it's, if you think about the way that a bean looks, it does have ridges on the side. So we'll try and do our yellow. So it's going to be quite dark here. Oops. I'll try one that works, like this one. Quite a thick line here. So curves round and then fades out. There's nothing to say that you couldn't do this, as we will do a bit later on, with a variety of paints. And I'll try and spread that out. Remember that this part here, we're going to have green. And remember, the edging of the green is going to follow this. It's going to be darker here. Curve it round. Here. It's going to fade into that yellow. Finally we have red, and why don't we do a hard red line on top here, as well as everything else. Fade that out so that it mixes in. And now we're starting to have something that looks, if it was, I think that what I might try and do is just to re-emphasise that red line, again by using a filter pen on top of it. Fade that out. You've got a pretty colourful bean. I'll try and do this a bit harder here. And how long did that take? Just to try and show that you can use shading to try and give the emphasis on the three-dimensionality of an object. It's not just the beans that we're looking at in Jack and the Beanstalk. We're actually looking at some of the figures. Well, a quick way of trying to think about a human form is, it's an egg shape followed by circle, egg shape, circle, egg shape, circle, like that. And that is, it's not exactly a stick man, but this is the giant. As you can see, I've set like quite strong shoulders. And this could be shown to the children to actually make the giant, or you can do what we've done before, make it so that it's a template and you've emphasised the body shape, and again you place a blank sheet of paper on top, and always, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been using blue tack to hold these pieces in place so you don't see all of the scoring and all of the other parts of drawing. So you just draw on top of those lines. Those are the shoulders, I have drawn this giant with quite strong, a strong muscular shape, but I've left the head and the face. And whilst it's good to use templates, you do want the children to feel as if they have some of their own input into the actual build, shape, face and body of the giant. So there's an outline. Again, I'm using quite a heavy pen here, a pencil, sorry, 5B. There's body shape. And on top of that, they can then draw the face. Well, if you think that it's an egg shape, and then they can draw a face, and they can draw the hands or the clothes. But they've got a mannequin, and they're not going to be spending all day trying to draw a man by then rubbing it out. Well, one of the things that I would like to be done would be not just the actual shape or the body, but it is some of the clothes of the characters. And here what I've done, and if this actually fits over the top of the shape, so if you want to become all Victorian on me, you could actually get the children to make it. But one of the design aspects I would like the children to do is to talk about the way that the clothes are made. And through this template, you can see what it is that is going to go over his muscles and his shoulders. So like a jerkin, or the fact that they're going to draw the thing that he has at his top, a shirt, a coat, and